In honor of Valentine's Day, Ohio State University is bringing back Sex Week, this time virtually. Colleges across the nation are hosting Sex in the Dark events. We'll get into what all that's about. Plus, in our top story of the week, did you know, my friends, if you swipe left on a person of color on a dating app, you're actually a mean, hateful, bigoted racist. At least that's what a UMass professor is saying. We'll get into that. I'm Addison Smith. This is the Campus Countdown. Well, Valentine's Day is coming up, love is in the air, and boy oh boy does Ohio State University know it. This is why they're hosting their Sex Week, this time online due to COVID-19. Campus Reform has the report, quote, Sex Week, which will be held for the third year in a row at OSU, will be hosting several virtual lectures for students to attend to learn about certain topics. For example, some of the lectures that will be conducted are titled That's Toxic, a talk on healthy versus toxic masculinity, Beyond the Gender Binary with A-Lock, Abortions Explained Plainly, a panel of professionals, and Kink 101. Now, even more notably than that, I'm personally intrigued by the workshops they're having on cyber sex during COVID-19, the workshops they're having endorsing sex work, and the panel that they're having on giving girls advice to start an OnlyFans account, which is essentially the same as sex work if you ask me. Now, it's important to know how these events are made possible. Money seems obvious enough, but where's this money coming from? It's coming from three places, really. It's coming from students' tuition, it's coming out of the taxpayer's pocket, and it's also coming from partnerships. And Ohio State has several partnerships, most notably Planned Parenthood. And they explain why, quote, Planned Parenthood is a huge provider of health services for men and women, particularly low-income women. They do STI testing, STI treatment, cancer screenings, pelvic exams, birth control distribution, community education, and so much more. You know, personally, I'm pretty shocked and horrified and troubled that they would use such gendered language as men and women, but that's besides the point. Notice what they left off of these lists of services. Their biggest moneymaker of all, killing children. That's what they left off the list, but I'm sure it was an honest mistake on their part, but we won't get into that. The point is, colleges are hypersexualizing students. They're teaching them that sex is just a casual, non-serious thing that carries no emotional or intimate implications or anything like that. Our generation no longer believes in the sacredness of sex, and apparently colleges have a lot to do with that. Sex has a purpose, and it has a purpose beyond pleasure or even beyond procreation. It's an intimate bond with your significant other. It's the most intimate aspect of human relationships. But now colleges are feeding this watered-down, modernized, unsacred view of sex. Do it whenever you want, however you want, with however many people you want. Doesn't matter. That's what colleges are teaching. Our number 2 story of the week, colleges across the nation host Sex in the Dark events. Now, before we get further into this, let me just tell you that, thank God, the title is not self-explanatory. Colleges nationwide are hosting these events that one college describes as an event where, quote, professional sexperts, oh God, answer your deepest, darkest questions. No question is too simple or too outrageous. Free glow necklaces and safer sex supplies is available. Another college adds more details. It, quote, helps educate students on sexual health, sexual identity, sexual assault awareness, and sex education. Now, there's a lot of colleges that are doing this. Binghamton University, Townsend, Rowan, North Carolina A&T, State University, Vanderbilt, Boston U, and I assume several more. A couple of points to be made here. Number one, same as the Sex Week event story, there's way too big of a focus on sex on college campuses. Call me traditional, but all of this just strikes me as incredibly weird. I mean, the idea of going to a public event, well, it's public, but it's also private because no one knows who you are. It's in the dark, but it's, we'll call it a public event. The idea of going to one of these and asking a stranger one of the most sexually intense, dark, nasty questions you can think of just doesn't sit right with me. And the fact that these events are widespread and seem to be high demand really scares me for this generation. I think when you take something like sex, as I said earlier, that it's meant to be an intimate, sacred thing, and you just completely pervert it, twist it, fetishize it, and all the more, not only is it just gross, but it loses all of its meaning. It goes from being an activity that you share with your partner to an endless experiment and quest to fulfill your filthy desires. This, to me, is colleges teaching that sex is just an experiment for your enjoyment, They've completely emptied it of purpose and dignity. In our top story of the week, we are back with Professor Hot Takes. 2 episodes ago, you'll remember our friend Jane Ward, who authored the book The Tragedy of Heterosexuality. Well, this time, our friend at UMass, Jennifer Lundquist, has co-authored a book titled The Dating Divide, in which she thinks that you, yes you, are racist if you swipe left on a person of color on a dating app. Lundquist co-authored this book in which she examines, quote, digital sexual racism. She argues that, quote, anonymity, tongue twister, built into the design of online dating, pursuing, ignoring, messaging, responding, requires constant categorization of large populations of people based on markers like skin color, eye shape, and hair texture that are tied to social categories of ascribed difference, such as race. This new racism allows people to filter and ignore entire groups of people on the basis of those markers, yet it remains invisible from the public eye. At the same time, the desegregated space of the internet interacts with kinds of disinhibited social interactions that online discourse exacerbates, fostering openly expressed forms of sexual racism that is rarely exposed in face-to-face courtship markets. This is what we refer to as digital sexual racism, a distinct form of new racism, which is meditated and amplified through the impersonal and anonymous context of online dating. My God. I don't know what to make of the term new racism, first of all, but okay. I want to break this down carefully but clearly. It's important that we define racism, and I think I have a pretty solid definition right here. Racism is the belief that some races are better than others, or treating other races unfairly because of their respective race. That's probably the simplest definition of racism that I can think of. If we take this to its logical conclusion, I can easily argue that homosexuals are heterophobic, that heterosexuals are homophobic. I can argue that you're racist against Irish people if you prefer to date people that are tan. Sorry, Irish people. Someone had to be sacrificed on my altar of examples. I can say you're transphobic if you want to date a biological male or female. All this professor has accomplished is opening up the triggering floodgates for people to obsess over something new to cancel white people for. I'm pretty sure there are plenty of people of color who prefer to date other people of color. Not because they hate white people or think of them as inferior, but simply because people have different tastes and different appetites. And as a white dude, I say more power to you. If you're a black woman and you only want to date black guys, you find black guys more attractive, fine, I don't care. I don't find it a bit racist either. And I doubt this professor would be so quick to condemn digital sexual racism if the races were reversed. That will conclude this week's episode of the Campus Countdown. Thank you for tuning in, and happy Valentine's Day in advance. I hope you get to spend the day with the person you love, which in my case will be me, myself, and I. If you're not already, make sure you're following us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.